Chapter 8. On the Trail. As they plodded on along the road, they talked about what they should do next. They were determined not to abandon the Kingfisher, although they realized that keeping out of the hands of the police was not going to be easy if they took the boat out. "We have some paint on board," said Carl. "If we painted a new name on the bow, at least they wouldn't recognize us that way." They also decided to leave with the yacht as soon as they reached the island. They had to put as much distance between themselves and the town as they could. But which way should they go? Tom had a plan. "We have to find Jimmy and his gang," he said. "They must be responsible for the stealing and the break-in, and they deliberately made it look like we were to blame. We can't go home until that bunch is in jail." They all agreed, but they knew it was easier to say than to do it. Cutting across the fields, they were soon on the edge of the lake. Meanwhile, the night had yielded to the first faint glimmerings of dawn. In the dusk, they could just make out the outlines of the island where Tom had hidden the Kingfisher. Tying their clothes in a bundle, they swam out to the boat. The Kingfisher still lay as Tom had left it, camouflaged with branches and reeds. Hurriedly they dressed and then tore off the camouflage. Then Carl opened a can of paint and painted another name on a wooden plate to be tacked over the name on the bow. It read, "The Blue Jay." "That takes care of that," he said, satisfied. "When the paint dries, I'll tack it to the bow. It fits in with our colors." The others had meanwhile hoisted the sails and started the motor. Carl went into the cabin to prepare something to eat, for they were all starving. Bert took the helm, while Tom studied a map to find a route by which they could make their escape. Although the sun was not up yet, it was already light. The sails billowed in the morning breeze, and the boat surged forward over the gleaming water like a graceful swan. They left the lake through a small river. In the east, the sun came edging over the horizon, sending its rays over the sleeping countryside. The mist shrouded the pastures on both sides of the river, and sleepy-eyed cows lay peacefully chewing their cuds. Long-legged birds ran through the grass or swooped through the clear morning air. The surrounding countryside was a picture of rest and peace. The boys saw no one except for two farmhands in the distance milking cows. They paid no attention to the sailboat. Carl prepared a generous breakfast, and the boys devoured every last crumb. They were enjoying their freedom, but none of them felt very secure. Although they didn't talk about it, each of them carefully watched the surrounding country for signs of the police. So far, no one had seen anything to worry about, however. Through the small river, they eventually reached a wide canal. Here they could travel faster because they had more room to maneuver and the wind had picked up. The Kingfisher, now the Blue Jay, cut the water with good speed, passing several other boats. Tom kept studying the map and mulling over different routes. After they had sailed for over 2 hours, he said to Bert, who was still at the helm, "In another kilometer or so, you'll see a smaller canal branching off to the right. Let's turn down that." "Why?" asked Bert, surprised. "We have the wind with us and we're making good time." Tom showed him the map. "If the police figure out that we've taken off in the boat, they'll look for us here. So it's time we get off this canal. Look, here's a way to go." He traced a route on the map with his finger. "By following these smaller channels, we can reach this little town before tonight, if all goes well. They won't look for us there. Tomorrow is Sunday. We can go to church there and take it easy for the rest of the day. On Monday, we can begin looking for Jimmy and his gang." "We'll never find them," Carl said pessimistically. "We have no idea which way they went." Tom smiled. "I have a plan that may help us pick up their trail," he said. But no matter how much his friends pleaded, he wouldn't say more. When they reached the small canal, they turned as Tom had suggested and sailed on, undisturbed. Although the wind was no longer as favorable as it had been before, they continued to make good time. Gradually, they began to relax. But when a bridge keeper gave them a close scrutiny as they passed under his bridge, they had some very uncomfortable moments. The man made no attempt to stop them, however, and after going a little further, they left the canal. This time they turned down an even narrower waterway, and they had to be very careful not to run aground. Through this channel, they soon reached a wide river where they could sail at top speed with a good wind. After the violent thunderstorm of last night, the weather was again beautiful, although not quite so hot. They saw very few people on this river, except for an occasional fisherman standing on shore. Tom was now at the helm. Carl was standing at the bow, with Scout beside him. Suddenly, Carl whirled and came scrambling back to Tom. "What's the matter?" asked Bert. "There's a policeman standing on the bank about 100 meters ahead," he replied. Bert and Tom looked past the bow. Sure enough, there stood a man in uniform, gazing across the river. Was he just taking a breather, or was he here looking for them? "You two get in the cabin. Hurry, and take Scout with you," said Tom. "Maybe he won't pay any attention to the boat if he thinks I'm alone. There must be plenty of sailboats that passes down this river." Carl, Bert, and Scout disappeared into the cabin. Tom kept the boat running in the same direction, his heart pounding in suspense. He tried hard to look casual. The Blue Jay was now almost even with the policeman on shore. Tom held his face partly turned away, but kept a close watch on the man out of the corner of his eyes. He seemed to be lost in thought. For a moment his eyes focused on the sailboat, but then he looked away again and strolled off, heading down the river in the other direction. Tom breathed a sigh of relief. The Blue Jay cruised on. In a few minutes, it rounded a bend in the river and passed out of sight of the policeman. "You can come up, fellows. It's all clear," cried Tom. They reached the village sooner than expected. It was set between two large lakes and was famous as a center for water sports. Large numbers of sailboats and motorboats and yachts of all kinds were anchored near the village. The boys, however, tied up their boats some distance from the others. They didn't want anyone to get a close look at them. Carl went to check the provisions in the cabin, then reported, "We'd better do a little shopping tonight, or else we'll go hungry tomorrow." "Should we split up?" asked Tom. "Remember, the police will be looking for 3 boys and a dog. If we split up, we won't draw attention so fast." "Oh, this town is full of tourists at this time of the year," argued Bert. "No one will pay any attention to 3 more strolling among the Saturday night crowds." He was right. The streets were bustling with tourists jostling each other on the crowded sidewalks. No one paid any special attention to the 3 boys, and they began to feel more and more at ease. They carried 2 large tote bags for their groceries and stopped first at a butcher shop, then at a stand selling fruit and vegetables. "Now let's find a grocery store," said Carl, looking up and down the street. Across the street was a large building with a small grocery store attached to an old-fashioned inn. They seemed to be run by the same person. Inside the grocery store, they ordered a list of provisions that Carl had made up. An open door gave them a good look into the inn. Tom seemed to be turning something over in his mind. Suddenly he asked the clerk, "Do you have any postcards?" "You'll have to get them in the inn," the clerk told him, and pointed to the open door. Tom slipped through the door to pick out a few postcards. His friends saw him chatting with a man at the desk. As the clerk began to help them with their list of groceries, they paid no further attention to him. Not until all their purchases were in their tote bags did they again look at Tom. To their surprise, they saw that he had taken the big map out of his pocket and unfolded it on the counter in the lobby of the inn. He was talking to the clerk at the desk and making notes on the map as the clerk talked. "Hey, Tom, we're ready to go," called Carl. "Coming," Tom called back. They saw him hurriedly make a few more marks on the map and show it to the clerk, who nodded his approval. Then he folded his map again and put it into his pocket and walked out. A few moments later, they were on their way back to the Blue Jay. "What were you doing in there with the map?" Bert asked curiously. "Oh, nothing special," Tom answered smugly. "Just collecting a little information." This, of course, made his companions even more curious, which was just what Tom wanted. He walked on with a superior look on his face. "Come on, Tom," groused Carl. "Cut it out. You look like you just invented the wheel." Tom laughed. "Oh, all right. I was just trying to find out where the happy wanderers have gone." "What? You mean that innkeeper saw them?" the 2 friends cried at the same time. "Not exactly," replied Tom, "but he did know something." Bert and Carl looked disappointed. Tom thought he had been putting them on long enough and began to explain. "It's really very simple. Jimmy and his boys told us they made their living touring the fairs and carnivals to put on their shows." "You mean to steal," corrected Carl. "Right. In any case, we have some idea where these guys hang around. When we were standing in the store, I thought to myself, The innkeeper in a tourist town should know where the attractions are in the area. I was right. He had an almanac that gave the dates of all the fairs and carnivals and boat races and other shows held in the district. I noted them all on the map beside the places where they're held. But we can't visit all those carnivals and fairs, objected Bert. We don't have to, countered Tom. Those guys were traveling in a horse-drawn trailer. They don't make very many kilometers in a day, and they can only be in one place at a time. From what we know, we should be able to trace the route they probably followed. Maybe we can intercept them somewhere. Bert and Carl had to admit that Tom's plan had been well thought out. When they reached the boat, Carl began to prepare Sunday dinner, while Tom and Bert got the Blue Jay ship shape. They were all very drowsy from going without any sleep the night before, but they had a lot to do before bedtime. After supper, they spread Tom's map on the table and together studied Tom's notations. They had little trouble sketching out the route that Jimmy and his gang probably took. The happy wanderers, they concluded, were nowhere in their neighborhood, and to catch up with them would not be easy. The Blue Jay had to follow the rivers and canals. Nevertheless, after some debate, they decided on a route that they hoped would cut across the trail of the four thieves. Only then, groggy with sleep, did they finally go to bed. On Sunday, they walked back into the town for church, leaving Scout to guard the boat. After church, they took a quick walking tour of the town, then headed back to the boat. They still had a few preparations to make, and they needed another good night's sleep. They were in bed shortly after dark, ready to rise early the next morning, and they had only one thing on their minds: to track down Jimmy and the happy wanderers.